And so we are on the air. Hopefully you can see my ACT screen. Welcome to 12.3's weekly virtual user groups. And today's topic is screen customization. And I'm going to go kind of fast today because there's a lot I want to do. In the past, I've told you how to add a checkbox field or how to add a drop-down field, but I want to spend a little more time today on why a field should be a checkbox or why it should be a drop-down. And the reason why is because I actually work with a client right now who wants to add some fields. And these fields can all be achieved by a number of different ways, and there's drawbacks and advantages to each way. So we're going to kind of use his use case as an example. So we're using the ACT 2016 demo database. Everybody gets a copy of this database when ACT installs. It's a good one to play on. I'm logged in as a user named Chris Huffman. If you ever want to use your ACT demo database, the version here depends on which version of ACT you're running, but the login is always the same, Chris space Huffman, Huffman, and no password. That gives you admin rights. What we're going to do today is we're going to add some custom fields to ACT and then design the screens. Now, anybody can design screens, but to add custom fields to ACT, you have to be an administrator. And just to talk about that real quick, if I go to Tools, Manage Users, if this is grayed out, then you don't have admin rights. Actually, we're going to go to Define Fields, and if that's grayed out, you don't have admin rights either. So you'll see that this tools list on my ACT is quite long because as an administrator, there's a lot I can do. I'm just going to quickly go into Manage Users. This is the demo database. These are all the demo users. Here's Chris Huffman, and his security role is administrator. You need to be an administrator to do what we're going to do. Also, when you define fields in a database, you have to kick everybody out of the system. It's kind of like fixing an airplane while you're flying it. You gotta land it and work on it in the ground. So you'll see here when I go into the define fields mode, it's going to kick everybody out. Now this is a demo database, nobody's in it, but obviously your production database probably will have people in it. So if you're doing extensive screen customizations, you probably need to plan this a little bit. You want to plan what fields you want, where you want them, and then you want to do your work, get in, get out, so that you're not down too much, and then you can get back up. So the last thing I'm going to tell you to do is before you do this, if you're doing it on your own and you're kind of a newbie, there's a file backup. Always make a backup of your database just in case you do something awful. Sorry, I'm slurping. I like to drink coffee. So under Tools, I'm going to go to Define Fields. And if there were people in the database, I'd get a screen that says there's people in the database and they need to be kicked out. Because what it needs to do is it needs to put a database lock. And you'll see at the top here, this database is locked. That's because nobody was in it besides me. So this database is now, not online. Nobody can use it. If there were people in there, a box would come up with a list of all the people who are in, and you have to run around and kick them out. There are 4 entities in ACT that you can customize or extend with custom fields, and those are contacts, companies, groups, and opportunities. I guess there's products. I forgot about products. Not often done. Today, we're going to extend opportunities just because this is my client's particular use case. In the past, we've customized contacts. In fact, I can see that there's a big text field up here on this record. That's a contact record. So if I go to opportunities, it shows me a list of all the fields and opportunities at the moment and what kind of field they are. These are called field types. There are about 30 field types, well, maybe 20, but a lot of different types of fields. And this is where the complexity of ACT kind of, I don't want to say it's a disadvantage, but because there are so many different field types, you have to think about what kind of field you want to add. And for example, the first question my client asked me about opportunities is he wants a field on there that says, is the prospect a multinational company. You know, let me find something better here. Let me do let's see, what is the value of the claims they placed in the last 12 months? Okay, that's a good one. So this is a credit collection or credit processing company, and when they're working on an opportunity, the sales manager wants to know how many claims have they processed in the last 12 months. So how many is a number. And so when I create a new field, I could do it as a number. Numbers can be, 5 digits, 10 digits. They can have decimal points. Say it's an interest rate. It might go out to 5 decimal places. If it's dollars, that's called a currency field. And then finally, you can actually express a number as text. Or, we're going to do this like 3 different ways just to show you what I mean. It all has to do with the searching in that. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to create a new field. And so I click on create a new field, and it's asking me, let me just go back here, make sure that I'm in the opportunities part. Otherwise, if I were in contacts, which is kind of the default, or wherever I am when I launched defined fields, you'll add a field to contacts when you meant to add it to opportunities. So make sure you have opportunities highlighted, and you go up here to create a new field. And then I give the field a name, and we'll call it annual claims. And I guess we'll make it a number, but the field data type, I want to review this list with you. I could make it a character field. Character fields are words like an address or a name. But there's a character field. If I go up here, there's an address field. That will actually add 7 fields. There's an address 1, 2, 3, city, state, zip, and country. All get added as a single block of fields. So I could create an address called summer home, and it would create all 7. So a calculated field doesn't store data, it just does math on 2 other fields. If we have time today, we'll talk about that. Can you change the field type of an existing field? Question from AJ. Sometimes. I can sometimes convert a number to a currency because I'm really just putting a $ in front of it, but I can't really convert a date to a currency. That would be weird, right? How do you turn November 15th into a currency? So if it lets you, you can, and if it doesn't let you, you can't. Hate to be flippant, but it kind of makes sense once you do it. Character fields are text. Character fields have a 256 character limit. If you want to store more than 256 characters, you use something called a memo field, like this big thing over here. Currency fields display as dollars. If you were in Europe, they would display as euros. They read your computer's system settings. A date field is a date. A date time field is a date with a time. A decimal field is a number with decimal places. An email field is what you think. It will, if you click on it, it'll launch email. So it looks like text, but it has some smarts behind it. Initial caps will take, it'll take the I and the C of every word and capitalize it. So maybe you want to use that for company, but we already have a company field. Lowercase does it all in lowercase. So you can force a little bit of formatting. A memo field is a huge block of text. A number field is really an integer without decimal places. A phone field is formats as a phone number. So it will actually dial if you have dial software. Can number fields have a decimal? Numbers can't, but decimal fields can. Remember, I have a decimal type up here. I could go out to 10 decimal places if I want, even more. Then there's a picture field. We'll play with one of those today, but I can actually put somebody's picture on a screen. Time is just the time part of a date. Uppercase converts everything to uppercase. A URL address is another text field that if you click on it, will open up a browser and take you to a website. And then a yes/no field is a checkbox. So there's a lot you can do here. We also sell a product called Goldmine. In Goldmine, you have 3 types. You have text, number, and date, but you don't have check boxes and stuff like that. So you have to do things a little differently. ACT really gives you a lot of flexibility here, but also now you've got to understand, when do I want a number, and when do I want a decimal, and when do I want text? So in the case of annual claims, that's probably a number. I don't think we need to do partial claims, like we're not going to do 10.5. So it's really an integer. So I'll call it a number. And then because it's a number now, I can put some rules behind it. Like the first one is allow blank, which means the user can leave it blank if he wants. If I turn this off, the user has to put something in there. Be careful about forcing people to fill in data. If they don't know, they'll put junk in there just to get past the rule. Generate history will actually put in history if someone changes this number. Again, your history tab can fill up with a lot of field changed type stuff. Primary field is when you duplicate the record, it'll copy. And then I could have a drop-down list of numbers. For numbers, that's kind of goofy, but we've all used drop-down lists, and later on, we're going to actually build one. So I'll come back to that. If I hit next, the default value, I could actually start with all new opportunity records will by default put the word number 1000 in there. If I try to type FFFFF, which I'm doing right now, I know you can't see me, it won't take it because this is a number field and you can't put F in a number. So I'll say the default value is 0. And that's all this really needs to know. Now, if it's text, it wants to know how many characters and stuff like that. But it really just asks me, do you want to drop down? Can people leave it blank if they don't know? Do you want to track history on it? So these are all neat little options. Don't go crazy on them. You track history on every field and your database will get huge. So these triggers you can just skip. I almost never use them, but I can launch a program. I could actually launch a calculator program every time I change that number because maybe I've got to do some thinking or something, but hardly ever use this field. So I hit finish, and I have now added an annual claims number. And it's actually right now going through the database. It just added that field to every record in the database. I have 213 opportunities, so that didn't take too long. But if I had 100,000 opportunities, it would take a little while to add that field. But see, I now have a field, and it's called annual claims, and it's a number. By the way, there's some advanced stuff we almost never use called field security. I can actually in here, right now Allison has full access to this field. She's a user in our system, but if I want her to only have no read only, which means she can see it, but she can't change it, or I could even make no access. She can't even see it. Maybe this is a social security or a credit card field. Maybe you don't want everybody to have access to that field. So you can actually go in and have user level, field level security. Gets complicated. I'm going to cancel out of here. Talk about that some other time. I'm now going to go back home here, and so there was an annual claims number. I'm going to do this also. Well, there's another question here. Let's see. Has the prospect's pain points been identified? So again, as a salesman, they want to know on this opportunity, have we figured out what their biggest concern is? If anybody's been through Sandler sales training, this pain point is how you identify the customer's need. What's their real need? Are they driven to find a better price? Is the product not working? Are they looking for a feature? Are they angry, emotional, that kind of stuff? So the question here says, has the prospect's pain point been identified? Well, I could do that with a checkbox. So I'm going to create a new field and call it pain identified. And I could do it as a character field. I'm going to do it as a character field, but right now I'm going to do it as a yes/no field. And you see that there's no allow blank because a yes, no field is just a checkbox. It's either on or off. It's pure digital. There's also no drop down list, right? Because the only choices you could have is checked or unchecked. So because I'm doing yes, no, it's smart enough to know things go blank. And the default value is no. So when I create a new opportunity, it's unchecked by default. Again, those are my only two values for this field. And then again, it asks me if I want to launch a program, and I'll say no. So again, it's going to add that field now to every record in the database. And we called that pane identified, right? Just write these down. But there's another way I could do this. I could do it as text. So I could create a new field, and actually I'm not going to create a new field. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back. I'm going to take, ACT comes with 8 generic fields, opportunity 1, 2, 3, 4 to 8. And they're all characters, and I think they're all 50 characters, but we can modify that. So I'm going to take opportunity field 1, and instead of creating a new field and wasting space, I'm just going to edit this field. And the first thing I'm going to do is rename it and say, is pane identified. I'm just giving it a slightly different name so I don't confuse myself. Happens a lot. And I'm going to make it a character field. And it says use a drop-down list payment method, but we're not going to use that drop-down list. We're going to actually have to make another one. It's our next step. We'll have to come back to that. Kind of a backwards thing in ACT, and I'm hoping they change it someday. So the length of this field is 10. I'm only going to put the words yes or no. So really, I only need 5. A couple things about field length. I don't want to go into SQL too much, but there's a thing in SQL called a page. A page is about 8,000 characters. What that means is you can have about, 420 character fields in a single SQL page. 400 fields is a lot. But if I have 50 character fields, I can only have about 100 of them or 150. Now, ACT will actually let me have more, but it's going to create something called a spillover table. And so you can have infinite fields. But do you really want your guys filling in 300 pieces of data on an opportunity or a contact? I see a lot of people, they put in rows and rows of stuff. And they create these spillover tables and can really hurt the performance of ACT. Plus, the database gets really large. So don't have more fields than you need, and don't make your fields bigger than they need to be. I don't need 100 characters to put the word yes or no in there. I'll use 5, and so again, I'll hit finish. Now, in this case, it's telling me I'm chopping the field length from 10 to 5. This was an existing field. So if there was data in there that was 10 characters long, I'm about to chop off some data. So it's telling me I'm going to truncate data, and I don't care. I'm going to reuse this field. So now I have is pane identified, but that's a character field. And then finally, I think a better question is not is pane identified, but maybe in opportunity field 3 here, I edit this field and I say, what is their pane? Don't tell me you've identified it, because what I really want to know is what is it, right? So there's 3 different, and that'll be another character field, but it won't be a yes, no drop down. It'll be a list of pane, I guess. And so what is their pane? A field with what is their pane already exists? Are you kidding me? Okay, what is their pane? The pane. That's 64 characters long. That should be long enough to identify pane, so we'll just leave it at that. Did I really add that already? Look at that. What is their pane? Memo field. Interesting. Oh, you know what? That comes with ACT now in a new version. Sorry. Excuse me. So that's a memo field. That already existed. Okay. So finally, what I want to do is I want to build a couple of drop-down lists. we have this one called is pane identified. And the drop-down lists are for fields that have drop-downs like ID status, departments, industry. So I'm going to create a new drop-down list, call it pane identified, which this is a silly list, and it's a character list. I can describe it. I can allow users to edit this list, or I could automatically add stuff, and you want to never use that. I won't even talk about it. So over here is my list, and so I have yes and no. And I'm going to create a second list called pane. Again, I'm not going to let users automatically add stuff. If they misspell things, those misspellings wind up being in the menu. So under pane, I'll add like descriptive pane now, like price, delivery, features. Maybe it's political. They just don't like the guy or something. Maybe it's unknown. So this is just a list, and then I could describe these a little bit if people really don't understand what political means, something like that. Okay, so I've built these lists, but now I've got to associate these lists to these fields. So I've got to go back. This is a little wacky with ACT, but so I had one is pane identified. That is my 5-digit character field. And so I'm going to use a drop-down list that just says the pane identified list. Now that I've associated this list, I can force people to only pick off the menu, limit to list, and then a couple other things, show the descriptions. Hold on for a second. I have a question, long question. Can you go back and edit fields like character length after you've been using for a field for a while already? Yes, you can shorten or lengthen a field. It will warn you that you might be chopping off. Say I have a 50 character field and I've got some data in there that's 50 characters long, and now I make it a 20 character field. Well, I'm going to chop off the last 30 characters, right? That makes sense. I don't know if you can turn a memo into a character field. If it's a memo, you probably have to leave it. Can I create 2 drop-down fields such that when I choose a value in the first, oh, that's a drop-down validation. That's an add-on. That's not something ACT can do. What he's saying is, the drop-down values of one field are dependent on the value of another field. So I might have a field called region, and if it's in the Northeast, then under sales rep, I only want to see a list of the Northeast reps. I don't want to see the entire list of all reps. That's dynamic drop-downs and can be done with an add-on or some custom programming, but it's not a feature within ACT. Good questions. So I've just associated my yes/no list, and then I've got to go back, and now my pane field. What is the pane? I want to use my pane list of all the different panes. And I'm not going to limit it to the list. It's just a suggestion, but there might be other panes out there I didn't list. And I'm going to turn on multi-select. We'll see what that does. And that's 64 characters, and so that's enough. And so I hit finish. And now I'm going to close out the editor. I've added these fields, but I haven't placed them on the screen. So now it's the second half, and we're almost out of time. That's why I said we got to go fast and talk about a lot of stuff. But now it says, do you want to modify your layout? Because this is a 2-step process. One was I defined my fields. The second step, and now I have to place them on the screen. And so I'll say yes, and that will bring up the layout designer. Hopefully 4 opportunities. Here it comes. And it came up on the other screen. Many people run multiple layouts, but this is the opportunity layout called 1366 by 768. And there's a top half, and then there's a row of tabs down the bottom. And so I think I will put my stuff right in here. Kind of thin, but I want it on the top half where it's always visible. I could put it down here under user fields. In fact, the is pane identified. Well, first off, I created a new field, and it's called a yes, no field. So I'm going to click on yes, no over here, and maybe I'll put it right here. Just draw a little yes, no. And it shows me all of the yes, no fields on the system, and there it is, pane identified. And I'll include a label, and I'll hit add, and that's all. I'm going to hit the arrow keys and float it over. So here's pane identified. Now, without going into the layout designer too much, I can come over here and I can make it blue or red. They call it brown, but it looks pretty red to me. I can change the font. I can do all kinds of pretty stuff. Generally, yeah, I'm really good at this, and you'll find this is a lot like Access if you've used it. You know, once you get your fields listed, just have us come in. We can go pretty quick. But then I've got two other fields. I've got one called is pane identified. It's really here already. It's labeled opportunity 1. So I just drag, I grab both of them by dragging my mouse just to show you. I click here and then I kind of cover the two fields and both get selected. Both have handles on them. So I'm going to go over here and grab these two and drag them up to here. And it's called is pane identified, but the label is called opportunity 1, which is kind of silly. So I'm going to say pane identified. And then opportunity 3 was really the pane description field. So I'm going to grab these two and I'll put them right here. Pane. Now this is a 64 character field and it's also a multi-select, so I bet you it needs to be longer. Could be big. I'm going to just stretch it out here. I'm not going to try to make stuff pretty like this pane box here. That's too big. I'll put it here. I'll write justify it. I'll make it bold. These are all things you can do. We'll change the font. We'll make it a 10 point just to be silly, and now it looks like that. Okay, so let's just see how these fields work. I got to save this layout, and then I'm going to exit the layout designer. And I'm in contacts here, so let me go to opportunities. And let me bring up this opportunity at the top, picture frame limited. And let me just pull this divider down. So here's my pane identified checkbox. Now all I can do with a checkbox is either check it or uncheck it. So again, when the client was asking me, has the prospect's pain points been identified? I guess the sales rep could check it and say yes. But I don't think this would actually, you really want to know what is the pain. So that's why I said maybe we don't want to use a yes, no, although this answers the question. I could have done it as text, where I have no and yes in my menu. I mentioned Goldmine before. Goldmine doesn't use radio or checkboxes, and so I had to do it with text. Yes, no fields all over the place. But again, this doesn't really answer the question either. However, I'm allowing users to edit the list values, and so I could add perhaps and maybe. So this little drop box gives me more choices than pane identified. Finally, over here in pane, we actually list out the panes, and we made this a multi-select field. So we could say that it's really delivery and price, and it concatenates the two values and features. So here's one field the customer wants, and but then I always go back to them and I say, well, really, what do you want? Are you tracking the fact that we know, or do you want to be a little more descriptive, or do you actually want to see it described? I could have actually had a memo field, which was in the database. Remember, this came with a field we didn't touch. Let me add the memo field. So let me open up the layout designer one more time, design layouts, opportunity. How do you get to the layout designer for other things? I just went to tools, design layouts. And so I'm going to add one more field here. It's called a memo field right here. And I'm just going to throw it right here. Pain. And there it is. What is their pain? So somebody had already created a what is their pain field, and it was a memo field. So memo fields are big. And so I'll put this label at the top, and we'll save this and exit. And now in here, I can type, 7 years ago, our forefathers. So I can type all day long and to my heart's desire. In fact, when I get to the bottom here, a scroll bar will appear, unlimited text. Again, this can be hard to read for someone who just wants to know how many opportunities do we have where delivery is the main issue. Because you have to, text is kind of not, it is searchable by the database, but it's all context. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about, we can add fields all over ACT, be careful of spillover tables and making things big, and really think about what kind of information do you want to keep? The fact that pain has been identified, this is easy, you just check it. Over here, I have to pick from a list of 4 or 5 things, but it's still not very descriptive. Over here, I could pick multiple things. Over here, I could be extremely descriptive. The same is true with numbers. Sometimes we have we want to track this company's annual sales, and we can actually put in $65 million. Sometimes we just want to put in a text range of A, B, or C. Like, are they big, medium, or little? Because then I want to find all my A's. And so it's easy to just look up all the A's. They're big. You just have to define what an A is. So you could actually answer that question with text. Or you could actually say, I want to see a number field. I want to see a currency field. That's searchable too. And you'd have to say, give me everybody who's greater than $50 million, and that's an A. Question from Judy, how do you get to the layout designer? Oh, I already asked that. Tools, design layouts. You don't have to lock the database to go into the layout designer, but if you want to go to defined fields, you will lock the database. You have to be an admin. You're going to have to kick everybody out. So this requires some planning ahead of time. I always ask people, give me a list of the fields you want, what kind of field they are, how big they are, whether or not they need a drop box, whether you want security on them. It's a lot more involved than just a list of questions. And I'm not chastising the client. They know what they want. Now it's my job to give them the best possible way to put it in there. And that's where experience counts. So we answered one question 4 different ways, and they all have their merits. I think hopefully you can all see that. Does anybody have any other questions? I know I kind of flew, but in summary, define your fields, add them to the layouts. Really think about what kind of fields you want to track. How do you want to report on the information you're asking your people to put in? And also keep in mind that ACT ships with a number of layouts. Like this is called the basic opportunity layout, 1366. There's one here called 1024. My fields aren't on it. It's a different layout. I have to go into tools, design layouts, opportunities, and add them to this one too. So the more layouts you run, the more work this is, because you have to add your custom fields to every layout. The idea of layouts is if someone is colorblind, you can just run, or if they have poor vision, you can make the fonts real big. Or if they run everything on a very low res machine, you might want to have a layout designed for lower resolution, so they're not scrolling around so much. And that is kind of a quick overview of customizing the database. You know, you always do it to satisfy a business need, and you really got to think about the business need. By the way, my two fields are down here, but they're labeled wrong. See, there's my drop box for my pane and my yes, no here. Okay, I'm in the demo database, so I can't tell you what next week's session is. I'm going to stop recording now.